you want to call on somebody? Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
How about Bay Edwards?
Hi, I'm Bay Edwards. I'm the communications coordinator at the Colorado Press Association. So I'm here for CPA, but we also work within CoLab, so kind of here on behalf of both.
Great. Alyssa, Kim, Philip, any of you willing to jump in?
I'm willing. Hi, everyone. I'm Philip Clapham, and I'm the project manager with Colorado Media Project, and also, I guess, with CoLab. I am excited to discuss all the wonderful things I hear bubbling up around diversity, hiring, retention. So, yeah, I can't wait. And I am calling on, I guess, Kim. Sorry to throw you under the bus.
No, that's okay. I apologize. My last meeting went a few minutes late, so I apologize for my late entry. But I'm Kim Salvaggio. My pronouns are she, hers, hers. I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusionary Officer at Rocky Mountain Public Media, and I'm always happy to be to come to these conversations to listen and learn and share anything that we're doing in an effort to tackle the systemic racism that exists within media.
Alyssa, looks like you're last.
I'm last. Hi, I'm Alyssa King, she, her, hers. I'm the brand manager at Worklife Partnership, which is a nonprofit based in Denver that offers supports for frontline workers.
Awesome, thank you all. So the Diverse Hiring and Retention Working Group comes out of the Next Generation Sector Partnerships Program, which is a program of the Colorado Department of Labor and Colorado Workforce Development Council. It is one of many working groups. This one is focused on sharing strategies and resources for diversifying media staff to better reflect and represent the diversity of our audiences. I think we have a slide here that talks about, the general problem we're addressing, which is that the media has proven to be 10 to 20% less diverse than the U.S. workforce average. That's statistics from Pew Research on diversity in media. And then from RTDNA and ASNE, we have the radio newsroom staff are 87 to 91% white, 61 to 69% male. Newspapers do a tiny bit better, still 87, 88% white, 64% male. Television doing a tiny bit better than that, 77 to 79% white, and 56% male. As you can see from the chart that Aaron has up, that's still not representing the diversity of our audiences, even just in terms of race and gender. So that's what we're trying to address, at least here in Colorado. So we're going to do some quick recaps from the last meeting. We have some new members that have joined from the ONA chapter that May and Francie mentioned. They have a great cohort that includes colleagues and representatives from Chalk Beat and Denver Post, among others, I believe, that are working on really similar efforts. So we're really excited to merge with them. We're going to be hearing from them in a minute. But they didn't hear from the last meeting, so we're going to do a little bit of review of some of the things from last meeting, as well as for anybody else who missed that meeting. One is to reintroduce this diversity, equity, and inclusion tracker that we have been devising here at the Open Media Foundation. So I'll share my screen and unpin Aaron's. Did that work? You guys seen my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So the process we developed with help from BBC Consulting was to encourage media organizations to look at all the different groups that represent their organization. So for the Open Media Foundation, that includes our board of directors, our employees, people who apply for jobs through our Career Engine program, our on-air personalities, many of whom aren't employees, our interns, and then we brainstormed kind of really all the groups that could be there, our radio members, our students, event attendees, clients, volunteers, and tried to decide which ones we're collecting this demographic data for and what data we're tracking. So we're going to track racial and ethnic identity compared against census data. We're tracking sexual orientation, gender, age, income level, education, and then physical disability. And with each of these, we want to identify and encourage others to identify how we're tracking that. Is it part of the internship orientation? Is it part of collecting date of birth in their employment paperwork? You know, what are the pieces, and when is it optional and when is it required? So, so as we work towards a program that we're all going to hopefully be following, you know, of course, voluntarily, this is the first step, is encouraging each organization to kind of identify their different constituent groups, probably starting at least with their employees and staff, but then also freelancers or contractors, whatever groups they feel like are good groups to measure, what info they're going to track from each. And then it's important to identify how they're tracking each of those. When are those questions being answered? Where are they being collected? And then so DOM and Open Media Foundation put this data into a chart. So here's our board: ethnicity, gender, orientation, income, etc. Employees, ethnicity, gender, orientation, job applicants, DOM radio members, etc. And then for each of these, we developed what we're calling an inclusiveness score, which is the percent, at least, of those who responded to our question compared with the census data. And so this information will all be kind of pre-populated in this spreadsheet for those who want to use it. And then for us, the inclusiveness score simply just subtracts or just tells us the difference between those two. So you can see we're way overrepresented here for white and Caucasian on our board, 26% higher than just the ethnicity, and way underrepresenting Latino, Latinx ethnicity. So we haven't built this graph for all of these things quite yet, but we're working on doing it for really everything that we said we were going to track in these constituent groups: our on-air talent, our interns, all of those, so that we can identify which are the worst, where are we kind of doing the worst job of representing our population that we're serving. So again, this is the model we're recommending. We are trying to compare this against anything that INN or you know, Emma Bowen or anybody else is doing, so that we can compare with anybody else's work and not reinvent the wheel. But this is where we've gotten so far. And we have, thanks to Jordan's help, successfully tracked this information: ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, income, disabilities, all of those things for those, I think it's 6 groups: our board, our staff, people who apply for jobs through us, our on-air talent, our radio members, and our interns. So that's kind of a lot to review. Any questions or conversations about the DEI tracker before we move on to the hiring service summary from Hannah?
I have a question, Tony.
Yeah.
Will the tracker also capture job title or some sort of buckets for folks who do editorial work versus those who don't?
Well, so as we built it so far, definitely not, but you aren't the first person to ask for that. So I totally think we should change it to reflect that, as well as buckets like senior staff or junior staff or administrative staff, those sorts of things. And then we've also been talking internally about how we can track duration or like longevity of each of those staff, so that we can see, like, are the white people, the people that we hire who identify as white, are they staying longer? Are the people who we hire who identify as female, you know, staying less time? And is that an indicator of our culture not really, you know, cultivating and making these diverse groups feel welcome? So yeah, I think, Philip, we should indicate whether or not they are content creators, also indicate whether or not they are like senior or junior staff, however people report that. So I'll make a note for us to figure out the best way to represent that.
Awesome. And one other thought I had about just sort of capturing class disparity is it possible to add a question about whether or not you are a first generation college graduate from your family? And does the group think that's useful information?
Education.
I think that would be a good piece of information to gather.
I think one of the challenges with that is with these things, we are trying to compare it with data that we have. And I know that this data, like high school or equivalent, some high school, college, some college advanced degree, and other is the data that we have, I think, from the census. So I don't think that that's something that we can then compare with Denver's, with our population. This was actually the worst like offender that we had at Open Media, at least with people who are members of ours, is we realized we're doing well in a lot of areas with low income people, but our students, at least the people who are taking our classes, tend to be much more highly educated than the general population of Denver. So, but yeah, so that would be the one challenge I would suggest, Philip, is that we wouldn't know how to compare that with. It'd still be useful info, but it wouldn't be compared against census data.
You could potentially just search for that data. That's what Jordan and I did for the sexual orientation, because that's not a thing in the census right now. So we just found that online and we plugged that information in.
Oh,
and also, Philip, it's completely customizable. So if you guys end up doing it, with a certain organization and you want to ask different questions, you can always add that in. But definitely these questions are really good to, I think, include on the template that we give out. But just so you know, in case there's anything else you want to add later, it could always be added.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next piece, which is just an update from Hannah on the hiring service. Hannah, would you just give a quick overview of what it is, and then anything that has changed, or any new placements or anything since last month's meeting?
Sure. So our hiring service is a service that is aimed at increasing diversity amongst media professionals, and do this by providing supplemental HR to small to medium-sized media organizations, maybe organizations that either don't have a dedicated HR department or organizations that have a really small one. And so what we offer is that we will post take a job listing of theirs, review it with the employer for diverse appeal, post it to about 10 job sites that we have identified as job sites that produce a diverse set of candidates. And then we will organize and sort the candidates based on rubric given to us by the employer. And additionally, we send out a DEI survey to gather DEI information from applicants to make sure that, one, we are reaching a diverse swath of applicants, and two, further hone our service to post to the best job sites. And then also we take this information, their names and email addresses, and add them to our job seeker database. And with this job seeker database, we interact with these people who are seeking jobs in the media to offer them job opportunities, internship opportunities, volunteer opportunities, networking events, and training opportunities as well. And so far we've worked with 6 media organizations and placed 11 applicants. All applicants or not all applicants. 80% of applicants have been people of color, 80% have been women. And right now we have 5 open positions, including with Public News Service and High Country News. Does anyone have any questions?
So we'll just remind everyone that it's a free service for anybody who needs it, and please just help spread the word. We do offer it totally for free for anyone who needs that kind of HR boost. Thanks, Hannah. So Philip, you were going to say a little bit about anything that's happened with the Real Talk sessions around pay equity. Oh, and yeah, any kind of updates since last month?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So yes, I guess the recap for those who may not have been on the call the last time we had it. Rocky Mountain Public Media, Colorado Media Project, and CoLab partners partnered to put together a series of listening sessions that were peer-to-peer, journalists only, in order to create space for folks in the ecosystem to really sort of download a plethora of feelings about covering racism and police violence in the newsrooms, but also sort of feeling and experiencing that oppression as journalists of color, how to be a white ally within the newsroom, and sort of looking forward to what kind of ongoing work folks in Colorado could do in order to make real lasting systemic change within the newsroom. What we found, and I can throw the Medium link in to sort of that recaps a lot of our findings, but nothing that you probably haven't already heard. We know that longstanding recruitment practices within newsrooms and are broken. The hiring pipelines are short-circuited and sort of are approached with a box ticking approach. There oftentimes folks of color are hired into newsrooms, and they are the token one. This is a toxic culture. It actively prevents them from thriving. Let's see. We also talked a lot about how can newsrooms hold institutional norms to scrutiny. A lot of journalists of color talked a lot about their experience with this notion of objectivity that really sort of boils down to both sidesism sometimes, false equivalency, and breaks down trust of media within communities of color. And we talked some about being able to frame the reporting that happens around police violence in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities with a historical perspective and context. Basically that this is nothing new, it's been happening since 1619, if not before. And that white allies should actively call out racism within their spaces and to lead the change among their peers. That is part of the privilege that they hold, being able to not be silent. And so from all of those sort of observations that we've really just been listening to what you all and the rest of the ecosystem has to say about what kind of changes they want to see in their newsrooms. I've heard a little bit from CPR and Denver Right about conversations like these that they've decided to continue just within their newsroom. And there's also been talk, a very organic sort of bubbling up of a desire for pay equity, transparency. And so CMP and CoLab have been conversing with some media folk about what that could look like. Hopefully by next week or after that, we'll have a document to share, which would be an anonymous self-reporting of one's race, gender, and pay and role and your education background and all those things to sort of get a glimpse of what data we can gather and analyze as to what is pay equitable here in Colorado. I hope it is, but based on my readings, I doubt it. CJR put out a report last year showing something like Black women of color make something like $30,000 less than the white man in the Washington Post. Other more aggregate data surveys of multiple newsrooms showed again that women of color, women and then people of color, but specifically women of color, are disproportionately paid less than the men in their newsroom. So it's great to do this because I feel like we're really sort of taking the talk of equity and really putting it where it's most important, which is pay. So because it's great to be represented in the newsroom, but I hate, it's just a shame to be represented and then to be paid less. So we're working on that. Stay tuned.
Great. Well, thanks. Most of the work that we've done so far in this committee has been focused on the hiring piece, with the exception of the great stuff that Kim and Dr. Tara or Dr. J presented. And so I think today's meeting is going to be almost entirely about the retention piece of the diverse hiring and retention working group name. And I believe that we have May is going to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on at CPR and share a couple articles that are in the agenda. So May, would you help kind of set the stage for us?
Sure. So hello, everyone. Like I said in the beginning, my name is May Ortega and I work with CPR News. The slide says Taylor Allen would be here too. She's another reporter at CPR, but she got caught up with work stuff, so she won't be able to join us, unfortunately. But she sends her best wishes. So we at CPR News, and some of you have probably heard about this already. We've been dealing with a lot of issues around racism in our newsroom. There are a couple of links in the agenda if you click on them. So I guess I'll start off with the second link. It's kind of just, I'm going to explain what's going on through these links. So first, you should look at the second, like the takeaway one. Last week, 2 weeks ago? So in 2011, CPR hired its first person of color at all into its newsroom, and he was a Black man named Lee Hill. And Lee Hill now works for The Takeaway. I think he's their executive producer. And he did an interview a couple weeks ago where he talked about his experiences at CPR News. And he lays out during this interview the way he was treated, and it was just overtly racist. There was a time, and he says in here, he was trying to record something with a host, and the host kept telling him that he sounded weird and sounded funny and things like that, and that at one point he encouraged the whole newsroom to meet, come to this event that had to do, I don't remember exactly now, but with the Black community or communities of color. He invited everyone in the newsroom to come out, and meet with people there to make better sources, etc. And no one showed up except one person, and even then they just stayed for a little while and they dipped. A lot of the people who were there who did those things to him are still at CPR. And so this came out, and right before this came out, if you're in public media, or not even, if you're on Twitter, you might have seen the stuff about Stuart Vanderwilt. He's our company's CEO and president. So Stuart, he's been at CPR for 2 years now, I think. Before he was here, he came from a station called KUT in Austin, Texas. And that place had a very, very toxic, abusive, racist culture. And Stuart was in charge of the whole place. And essentially when things really started to come to a head, Stuart left and CPR hired him. So the issues there, as far as I know, were not necessarily resolved. So Stuart came to our station, and the same week, a few days before this interview with Lee Hill was published, somebody on Twitter came out tagging Stuart and everything, alleging that he called her after hours on her personal cell phone. She was 24 at the time, and threatened her career because she spoke publicly about the racism at KUT. So that happened, and then the Lee Hill interview happened, and then we had, this is where you can reference that other link from Colorado Independent. We had a company-wide meeting where the purpose was for Stuart to address to us these tweets that came out about him, and essentially trying to assure us that that wasn't the way he was going to handle things at CPR. But then the meeting ended up taking a turn, and it wasn't just a newsroom-wide meeting, it was a whole company-wide meeting. There were about 200 people there. And it just like people were just expressing, no one was really trying in the beginning, trying to talk about the Lee Hill thing. But then, you know, we brought it up and we were starting to discuss the issues with that and how there are still people there. What are we going to do to improve as a company? Make sure this doesn't happen, hire more people of color, pay our people of color better and all this kind of stuff. So it was a very intense meeting. And at the end, nothing solid really came of it, which if I'm being quite honest, that tends to happen at CPR a lot. Myself and a group of other people of color within the newsroom and white allies, we've been meeting with Stuart and news, the head of our news department, individually, trying to explain to them, this is what you need to do. Like, we're telling you what to do. And they're always just like, we'll see, you know. But we are seeing signs of progress. Our little group, we call ourselves the Equity Squad. We created a job description. We wrote it ourselves and we found candidates for a race and intersections editor. And finally, after weeks and weeks of meetings and pushing and convincing, we finally got the people in charge to agree to create that position. So hopefully by the end of the month, that job description, we are working with upper management to refine it and make sure we're taking the right approach to this. And then we'll see what happens. Hopefully by the end of the month, it'll be out there. So if you all know anyone who will be qualified, let me know. So that's just kind of where CPR is at. I'm also here with ONA because, and I'll have, should I talk about this now, Tony, or should I wait till the presentation? Because I also have a presentation coming up.
It's a little bit weird to separate the two, but I think let's wait till the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, and then there's some stuff that ONA is doing with, you know, people from different orgs, as Tony said earlier. So yeah, that's what's happening at CPR, and we definitely have an interest in making things better, not just for our own newsroom, but for every newsroom in the state and the country. So yeah, any questions? I
want to say congrats on getting that position hired. I know that KGNU just hired kind of similar position. And yeah, we spoke briefly yesterday. It's just so awesome to take the momentum of what's starting right now and seeing some of the kind of poor misrepresentation that was happening during all the Black Lives Matter stuff that's been happening over the last couple months and turning that into change that hopefully can last.
Right, and we talked about this yesterday with Tony briefly, that I think it's partly because of the Black Lives Matter movement and the momentum of that our management was even willing to hear us out on this new position. So it's really good. Yeah.
Any other questions for May? We're going to hear more about the work that her and her colleagues have been doing, sparked out of the local ONA chapter. But any other questions or comments from May? Congrats on the work you guys are doing at CPR. It's such an important player in Colorado media.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
May, what supports have been put in for you and your colleagues as you're being asked to speak with management about the issues that you're experiencing and seeing?
Well, supports, it depends on what you count as support and for who. Because ever since we had that big meeting, we set up, or HR set up, an internal resources page for people to share like book suggestions and links and things for reading and educating yourself on how to be a better ally to people of color. So that's one type of like resource for people, but that's not necessarily directly for us people of color. In terms of like supports for us, our CEO has set up these office hours where he just leaves like windows open so anyone can talk to him for as long as they need to you know, communicate what kinds of issues they think need to change, what things need to improve at CPR. So that's something, but besides that, nothing that I can really think of that comes to mind besides them encouraging us to like one of the meetings we had with our CEO, it was just like an hour of us telling him all the stuff that sucks and that needs to get better. And at the end, he said, well, this made me feel very uncomfortable. So I know that I have work to do. And that was like, great, I guess. But besides that, I wouldn't say anything like solid, you know, it's just more come to us and we'll listen to you. But at the back of our minds, it's always like, okay, but performative listening doesn't really do much, you know? So does that answer your question? If that answers your question, I'm sorry.
Great. Well, thanks. So Alyssa, hopefully this isn't too far astray from your work at Work-Life Partnerships. Open Media Foundation has done some work with Work-Life. We've just been really impressed with your work, and hopefully what you've heard so far, since you're not really a member of this working group, we've just invited you to present today, kind of helps explain kind of the context of what we're dealing with and how, you know, open media has some programs that are aimed at helping people bring on more people of color, but we haven't dealt with the issues that May was just talking about, and that the takeaway article was talking about that once you bring these people of color in the door, what kind of changes need to happen in order to make it a place where they can really thrive and last, and not a place where they just, you know, would feel unwelcome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, I think one thing that we as an organization are grappling with is how do we do a better job of connecting our work, our lane that we're comfortable with these topics. We know that the relevance is there, but traditionally we've focused so much, so our work really most directly affects lower wage workers, frontline workers. So we just tend to fall into the pattern of thinking about things in terms of class, in terms of income, and that's obviously inextricably tied to race, to diversity, to ethnicity. And so that's, I think, a big thing that we're starting to think about is how can we do a better job at looking at that more explicitly, calling it out. So I think that there's work that we still need to do there. But I think just kind of sharing, I don't know if I can share my screen, but I have a little mini presentation. Let's see if it'll let me. And then, oh gosh.
Is it letting you?
I think it's trying to let me, but it's showing me my 14,000 browser tabs and not telling me which one is the one I want. So I don't know that will help me. Let me try one more time.
Alyssa, that makes me feel better. I also have 14,000 browser tabs, and I once gave several people an anxiety attack when I shared my screen with all of those on there. So thanks for that.
Let's see. It may not.
I always just pick the first option and then navigate to whatever.
And hope that works. Let's see. I don't know if it's going to let me. Well, I'll just talk through it. I'll look at my slides so that I can remember what I wanted to say. So I think just it's helpful to kind of understand what it is we do, because it's a little bit new in the world. So our main service that we provide is called Resource Navigators. And these are people that we sell to companies as an employee benefit. They become kind of part of the workforce, and they just provide pretty much any kind of support you can think of to employees. So they are the most amazing humans. They know everything about everything. They are experts in life admin and talking to people in crisis, and just absolutely the employee benefits, figuring out your health insurance. Like, the list is so long that's our biggest challenge, is trying to explain how fantastic these people are. So part of the kind of magic of what we do is, because we're a nonprofit, there's a lot that we can do connecting employees with community resources. We can actually get grants to provide them supportive services. So something just like what you really need is someone to pay your utility bill this month, we can do that. But we also sell the service to businesses. So that makes us a really sustainable nonprofit. We're able to run a lot of our operations directly through our fees. And some of the biggest issues, top issues that we just see from most of the people that we see, are just affording their housing, affording food, decent nutrition, having their food be accessible. Utility bills is a huge one. That's where we do a lot of work. And then mental health is maybe the top issue. So it's often just as simple as overwhelming stress at work, stress at home, more serious mental health issues, and pretty much all of those categories are worse for people of color. So that's, I think, where this really ties in. So the work we do, we're there for people. We figure out, can we help you pay a bill? Can we help you budget? Can we connect you to an amazing resource? And so really the timing can be different depending on what the issue is, but part of what's special about it is that they build this relationship with you. They really build trust with employees. They work with them over time. They check back in. They make sure they're getting what they need. So I think it's really different, especially for people of color, where and we know that one of the challenges that they're also going to have is with community resources, with benefits. They're not always representative. They're not always culturally knowledgeable. And so it's just having that kind of almost personal advocate who can help you not only understand what's out there for you, but help you access it, encourage you to keep going, even if it's hard, even if you hit some barriers. So that's a lot of what we do and why I think it's just really special, and especially in these circumstances. And what that translates to and why we sell it to employers and make them pay for it is we decrease stress. So our kind of average percentage of clients that we decrease stress is 70%. We increase their confidence. We increase their comfort in dealing with similar problems in the future. So it's really sustainable in terms of how they feel coming out of being helped. They feel more able to tackle similar problems. And that at work turns into less distraction, better engagement, and better retention. So we have over a 90% annual retention rate for employees who work with a navigator. And of course, because I'm presenting, the dog is trying to get onto the desk right now. She is stomping on me. So the retention piece is really significant. And I think another kind of challenge that we have as an organization is just in terms of numbers. We see obviously fewer minority clients. We're working right now to understand if it's an inequitable difference or if it's just, we do know that our clients we see lines up with census data, and we don't know if it lines up with our employer demographics. So that's something we're trying to figure out to make sure that we're getting the utilization equally, but we just know, the numbers are smaller. So when we look at our impact data, our satisfaction data, we don't always have the numbers to really be sure that we're having an equal impact. But I think we know that for, a lot of our employers have very diverse populations. And kind of, I think one interesting way to think about it is the term involuntary turnover is kind of that bucket that they put into people who leave because they're not showing up to work, they're missing too many shifts, they're late too often. And involuntary is kind of a misleading thing because it's not, it goes so much deeper than just this behavior and the performance. And the reasons behind that are their car broke down and they can't afford to fix it. Their childcare is a neighbor, and sometimes that just falls through. And so those are the issues that we can help with. We can turn involuntary turnover into a retained employee. And it's so especially relevant for people of color, people who have lower wages because of the wage discrepancy. We see that in our own data. They have I think it's almost twice as much of our Black clients say that they experience food instability. There's some really big discrepancies in the barriers they face. Those barriers are the things that keep them from being a consistent, dependable employee, and then you see turnover. So, I mean, it's definitely, generally the populations that we serve, I think are different issues than in the media environment, but I'm gonna be interested to know how much you think that would be impactful at your companies. Are there, when you look at those populations of interns or contractors, are they lower wage workers? Do they have some of those problems? Just be interested to know. Yeah.
That's why we were, especially media organizations like ourselves or KGNU, we have 10 or 15 or 20 employees, but for every employee we have multiple interns or freelancers that only work a few hours a week. We have Vistas that run this program for us who, like AmeriCorps members, they're living in poverty. And, Hannah can probably attest that if it wasn't for the additional kind of benefits like food stamps and other support that she's able to access that just wouldn't be sustainable. And of course, you know, the goal is to get all your staff up to a certain pay level. But with organizations like KGNU or like us, where a lot of the people that are involved with us aren't even really staff, they are AmeriCorps volunteers, or they are just on-air volunteer personalities, interns, that sort of thing. Having resources like you guys offer, you know, I think makes a huge impact, especially for them and for.
Absolutely. Yeah, and an important point, that's one of my fun slide numbers, is when we're talking about low wage, our average wage is like 18 something an hour. We're not talking minimum wage. But when you look at the number I pull is the Colorado self-sufficiency wage for a single parent with one child. It's like $22 or $24 an hour. So it's not, I mean, I think it's so easy to go to, oh, it's, you know, it's minimum wage, of course, you know, how it's so hard to make it. It's really not the case. People who are making what is well above the goal minimum wage, the 15 bucks an hour that everyone's pushing for, they still cannot pay their bills. They cannot pay just, I mean, no extras, basic living costs. When you take the rent in Colorado, the health insurance costs, the education costs, people are struggling even with a fair market wage. So I think that's also a really important thing to think about. And yeah, so then there's a lot that we can do in just helping people make their dollar go further, find programs that can benefit them, get on government benefits that they just couldn't figure out on their own. But yeah, it's the need goes up to a much higher wage than I think people tend to assume.
Great. And one of the biggest things we heard when we were asking, you know, about the hurdles that exist for Colorado media and journalism entities, especially smaller ones, is that most of them don't have an HR department. They don't have a lot of those resources. They aren't lucky to have someone like Kim on staff. A lot of them, and Open Media Foundations is the same way. So we're always looking for opportunities like this, where you can kind of outsource some of that HR to these experts who can help make sure that each of your employees are able to find the different programs that they need to feel stable and supported. So any questions for Alyssa? Well, great. Alyssa, thank you again for presenting. We want to make sure people just know that that's available as a resource alongside what Hannah and other people are doing as a way to supplement our limited capacity to provide the HR support we want to provide for our staff.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'll just drop my email into the chat if anyone has more questions later on.
Thanks.
Feel free to reach out.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so the next step is we were going to talk about kind of action planning and some of our priorities. And I think one of the best things to jump into with that is to have May present again about some of the initiatives and priorities that her and her colleagues have identified. And then please, anybody can just jump in with anything that you guys are working on in this realm of diverse hiring and retention. May, you want to take it away?
Let me share my screen. I have a double monitor thing going on, so hold on. Okay. All right. How's that?
Great.
There? Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is supposed to be, Taylor is actually the one who did almost this whole thing. So thank you, Taylor, who's not here right now. So this is a brief about what we're working on right now. I will preface this with saying that while the ONA Rocky Mountain chapter isn't necessarily super new, it's maybe a couple years old at this point, these efforts that we're doing are pretty new. So we don't have like a long list of things. And that's part of the reason that we wanted to be a part of this, so we can make sure early on that we're not doubling our efforts and seeing how we can help each other out. So first off, our top goal and how we started these conversations was because of what was happening at CPR News and at, the Denver Post. So, and I explained this to Tony and Aaron yesterday. One of the ways that sparked this, and there were many things that led to it, is because somebody on Twitter had tagged like CPR News and the Denver Post, I think the Colorado Sun, maybe another newsroom that I'm forgetting, asking if they had any Black people in their newsrooms. And the only one who said yes was us. And we only have like 2 or 3 Black people in a company of like 200-300 people. So, and that was where we were like, well, that sucks. And we already knew, but you know, it kind of puts it in a, you know, spotlight, and it's pretty messed up. So we decided, how, you know, can we solve this problem? And we figured it would start by getting the raw numbers and proving what this issue looks like. It's harder to debate fact, right? Facts and figures. So some of the questions that we would want to answer are the ones that are in the slide. You know, what do diversity numbers look like around Colorado? Again, some newsrooms don't have any people of color at all. It's not just Black people, maybe Latinx people, you know, Indigenous people, Asians, you know, and why is that? So there are several reasons, which also go back to like Colorado's own culture and history. You know, how it's a very white area, and we've been trying for a while to recruit, at least at CPR, we've been trying to recruit people of color because of there's a journalist of color Slack, and we've been messaging people like crazy. We have this opening, because we're hiring a lot. When a lot of places are laying people off, we've actually been trying to find those people and let them know that we're hiring. But it's really hard because, again, these things that I already mentioned previously, people are like, I don't know if I want to go work in the place that has this kind of reputation. And also Colorado, like we've heard a lot that people on the coasts just are happier living on the coasts, you know, and Colorado just doesn't have that same culture and feel for them. I've never lived on the coast, so I have no idea. I'm from Texas. So yeah, we want to know what those numbers look like in Colorado. And if you do have people of color in your newsrooms, what kind of roles are they in? Are they in roles where they can make decisions? Are they in entry-level roles wherein they make the least amount of money and where they get like all the, excuse my language, but like shitty assignments handed to them? Because that happens a lot. And how retention is a really big thing. And I think Lee Hill's a very good example of that. And his story shows, like, you treat your people of color like very poorly, they're not going to want to stay. So what contributes to people of color leaving sooner than later, and which newsrooms have the highest rates of turnaround? Because I feel like that will be very telling in itself of why that is. And also what kind of opportunities, you know, okay, you're in the door, let's say you're maybe happy with your pay, happy with everything, but you want to move up, right? You have aspirations. What kind of opportunities are there for you to move up within your company? And if there aren't any, how difficult is it to kind of carve that path for yourself? So those are some of the questions that we want to answer. And there's a lot of them. I know it's very difficult to do that, but that is part of the reason that we want to gather these numbers and why we want to be a part of this, because we feel like if we work together, we can figure out a better way to do this. So the next thing, and it has to do with this diversity in, you know, Colorado's journalism industry, is including freelancers in this, because freelancers, I feel like it's already very challenging to be a freelancer for several reasons, and I imagine being a freelancer of color is even more difficult. So we want to make sure that they are fairly represented in these surveys, and not only like in their race, their background, disability, but, you know, income and all that matters as well. And another reason that we thought about having freelancers in here is because one of the newsrooms who was tagged in that tweet that I referenced earlier said, like, well, we have a freelancer who's Black, so there you go. But like, okay. But just because they're a freelancer, like, that doesn't mean that you're giving them a solid you know, means of income, or that you're valuing them as someone who's producing work for you. And the last thing is also very big, mental health support and resources for journalists of color. We have some journalists who are Black in our newsroom, and they've been very stressed, you know, covering the protests and just the pandemic and being Black in a newsroom in Colorado. And our insurance is through Kaiser, and Kaiser has one therapist who is Black, and she's already all booked up. So these colleagues who've been wanting to find a therapist who looks like them and who understands them, it's not an option. So I have a colleague who's been paying out of pocket every week to go see a therapist who looks like them because our own insurance, and that's a whole other problem, right? The fact that there are not enough, mental health professionals of color in the industry. But we, need to recognize that the insurance that we have and even the medical, companies that we can have don't meet the needs that we that what we require. So we figured we might as well try and maybe start some kind of like grant or something. That's another part of this. But before we get there, we just want to get it through management's minds and all kinds of newsrooms that if you're going to hire these people of color, you have to support them in various ways, which includes mental health support. You can't just send them out to protests and have them out there and then say, okay, good job, go home, do it again tomorrow, and that's it. So we're hoping to get that kind of idea better established, and hopefully in that it'll somehow establish like a fund or grants or, a way to work out better vacation times or breaks to help those people, so they don't get burned out and they're not miserable every day, dreading coming to work and seeing what kind of horrible assignment they're going to have to get tired on next. So yeah, those are our three main things. We have other things that we're working on. But yeah, so this is essentially what we're working on. We're hoping through this partnership, our original idea to get this data was to reach out to individual newsrooms, but we realized that that's going to be a really hard thing. So we're hoping through, through DEI and all this data and working with all of you, we can find a better way to do that. And, since ONA is made up of all journalists, we can, get in there and reach out to certain people. We have certain connections and see how we can support each other and get the best data that we can and move forward from there. And I think that's it. Does anyone have questions?
Hey, this is Philip.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, May. Yeah, so I'm so glad that you did this presentation because I think that it closes a loop. There's been several conversations I know that I've had with CMP and you and ONA and CMP and Tony, and right. So it's like there are a lot of these things are happening. A lot of these efforts have so much synergy to them. Like you're talking about a diversity report. Tony's diversity tracker seems very much aligned with that. CMP is really wanting to dig in on this pay equity thing, which seems a part of your diversity report potentially, right? Mm-hmm, so mm-hmm. I guess I lift up to the group that how can we think about sort of keeping abreast of all of these things, defining roles and ownership and really moving them forward?
Yeah, at this point, we had the feeling like the Open Media Foundation is a little more ahead of the curve in terms of developing the method for gathering this information, in terms of like how you have said earlier, I think that email thread, the way that we word the questions that we're asking and all that. We haven't made it that far because originally, and I guess where we're at right now, we didn't start these efforts till like 2-3 weeks ago, I think. We were trying to reach out to, I think, the Open Media Foundation, Colorado Broadcasters Association, the Press Association, and see what they already had and build on that. But it has definitely turned out to be harder than we thought it would be. So we don't really, at this point, we're kind of hoping we can figure that out together because we acknowledge that we're not very experienced in this type of work. So we're hoping to learn and contribute, of course, as well. But really, I mean, right now I don't have a clear answer for that because we're still trying to figure out where we fit into this,
Sure, no, that makes total sense. And I think for us, like we see ourselves as natural conveners in the ecosystem. And so like that seems like a natural role for us. Tools, maybe not so much, but I think Tony really has that covered. And so I think there are a lot of ways that we can do tool building, dissemination, analysis, and all the things together. So go forth. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to see how we can work together and how we fit into this. We're really excited about it. It's just we're kind of like, oh, we don't know if we're stepping on toes or doubling work or where the holes are and everything. So
May, it's Laura. I think we can help somewhat through what Philip is talking about with CMP and through CoLab, since we have connections to so many of the media outlets throughout the state. So let's connect. offline and talk about a way to, one of the things that we're doing as we're building the CoLab website, stay tuned, is gathering those resources for journalists. And the next meeting of the partner organizations is next Thursday at 11. So let's talk about whether there may be some, call to action, pitch, informational, or just information to share at that time. And then we can kind of see what makes sense, because I think Philip's point about trying to consolidate so people aren't reinventing the wheel all over the place. The work is hard enough. Let's not repeat it. Let's build on what each other has.
Yeah, everyone's busting their ass on trying to get the same one figure or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds great. Totally. Yeah, can you send me your email?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
And that is the design of the next generation sector partnership model that we're following with help from Colorado Workforce Development Council, is to just help make sure that everybody's aware of what everyone else is doing, so that if they do wish to partner and not go it alone, that opportunity is there. So yeah, this working group, the engagement working group, and all the other work, the great work that Colorado Media Project and others are doing, once a month we're trying to convene these groups and make sure that we're asking who else needs to be involved, who are we missing, people like Philip just helping connect the dots, which we're so grateful for. And yeah, I think we're doing a good job of helping make sure that the people that are doing similar work are aware of it, so that we can be collaborating. And I'm glad we're also moving forward and not just not in any kind of like analysis paralysis. We seem to be making progress every single month. So thank you guys. So yeah, May and I, as what we're talking about now is kind of like clear action steps. So I think it'd be good for Philip to talk about any action steps that you'd invite anybody else involved with around the like pay evaluation or content audits. May, and I believe it's Susan, right? And any other members of their group, we need to do a working meeting in the next week or so to figure out exactly how we incorporate these other factors into our questions and how we can organize that data. Because as we found, it's a lot easier to say we want to know X than it is to like actually get that data in a way that it's useful and comparable across organizations. So we're gonna have a working meeting sometime in the next week where we'll spend an hour or two just digging into this data. Is there anybody else on this call that would like to be a part of that? It's getting into the weeds too much for this whole working group, and we'll certainly report back. But anybody that wants to get in the weeds? If not, then great. We'll just report back once we figure it out. But we'll also take into account any suggestions that anybody sends us and the things that were said today by Philip.
Hey, and with that said, Tony, yeah, sign me up. I'm happy to throw my 2 cents in.
Great. And then on the agenda, I should note that the ONA just happened to put out a great article about like why something like a mental health fund for journalists of color would be needed. I put that link to the article from Lance Dixon in the agenda. Let's see, I think the Slack channel that's CMP set up is a good place for us to be talking about a lot of this stuff. I don't know if everybody's joined that. Philip, would you mind
Invite other people from ONA as well to make sure.
Putting that in?
Oh, thank you, May. Yeah, I dropped it in the chat. I'll drop it there again. It's a really great space for us to be able to continue the conversations in between our various meetings.
And is there anybody that would want to just like step up and kind of co-chair this committee? We're going to be having a brand new, both of our AmeriCorps Vistas will be aging out by the end of August, and we'll have a whole new batch that'll start a 1-year term in mid to late August. So they'll be playing a major role, but we'd love for anybody else to kind of co-chair and just help us take responsibility for forming the agendas, calling on guest presenters, that sort of thing. Anyone kind of raise their hands to be part of that? Philip, you're kind of already part of that, just like de facto, but through our weekly meetings. And I think one or more of the members of your group, I think, will end up being that as well. Should I name a point person, or do you want to just say the whole ONA Rocky Mountain group?
Yeah, for now, let's do that because all of our schedules are very weird. So maybe, next meeting, Susan will be here instead of me, or maybe Taylor or something. So yeah, let's just say ONA, and I'll make sure. That's why I want to make sure that everyone's in that Slack as well. So we're all on the same page and have everything, same info and everything. But yeah, we're good.
Tony, I was going to suggest maybe putting out a call for that with a little explanation of what it entails on the Slack channel. That might, for people who weren't able to come today or who may be thinking about it. But
yeah, and I can do that for each of the working groups, for the engagement working group too.
Great.
So good idea. Thank you. And any other initiatives that anyone wants to talk about to invite any other kind of partnership when this is all about us prioritizing kind of these member-driven priorities?
Yeah, I'll say one more thing, Tony. So there's not much traction on this idea, of course, but you've mentioned it, which is the content analysis or the content audit. And, just from my perspective, I feel like it's another one of those really important tools that we use to help us answer the question of why when we take these issues of anti-racism, anti-Blackness, anti-bias to management, right? Like, I think that so oftentimes the pushback is going to be, well, we have representation. There are a few people here, right? But we have to have proof that this stuff makes a difference. And we have to have proof too that sometimes our biases are implicit and they show up in the reporting. So there's no movement on it as far as CMP's involvement, or it's just been an idea that's bubbled up, but I welcome anyone who's super interested in helping that come to fruition. Please contact me.
This just in, Philip.
Oh,
sorry.
Yay.
This,
No worries.
this just in. Melissa and I just had a great conversation with some folks nationally, and the Center for Collaborative Media is working on a process that we're encouraging them to expand, perhaps nationally, perhaps with Colorado as a test case. So that may evolve into something that could help us in this state accomplish some of the work that you're talking about. So there's a seed of something there.
I love it.
It just happened. It just happened. Yes, stay tuned.
That's great.
Just happened.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
And Philip and I will also be reaching out to this trust, the Trust Project. One of the things in their kind of best practices is like a diversity report. What we're gonna, I've already written them to ask if there's kind of a template for their diversity report. Is this it? They're recommending, just a diverse voices statement and reporting kind of their own staffing diversity and that sort of thing. They've also talked about different things that I think overlap with Philip's Trust Project. So we'll just keep looking to see if there are other resources that we can also not reinvent the wheel as we're moving forward.
Awesome. And one other thing, guys, if you're interested, please reach out with the pay transparency and equity sort of project. It always takes that first very few brave folks to, although it's anonymous, to just go ahead and sort of put their information out there. In full transparency, I'm working with Mo Clark very closely on this. She brought it to me, and I'm not sure who else she's working with. I know she has some allies on her side, but I would love to let her know that I spoke to you guys and you've spread the word, and that folks will be coming to us to participate, because we really want to get that information out there and in view so that we can make change.
Philip, is the mechanism for doing this using the mechanism that was it the New York Times? CJR started a database. Are we using that same one, or are we developing a separate one?
So it's been developed based on that model, where it's capturing demographic information in an anonymous way that will help us look at Colorado as an ecosystem and compare newsrooms based on size, parse out data based on race, on gender, education, and so forth, to really see where pay scales are and if it's equitable.
So, sorry, I'm confused then of how to access it, or are we still in the development stage that we're just expressing interest? Sorry.
Right. So it's in development stage. There is
Okay.
the survey sort of exists. I'm happy to share it with folks who want to sort of like help with a soft launch maybe next week. I think I'm checking in with Mo tomorrow. We just want to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. We're capturing all the data that we want to capture. But I think the beginning is always the toughest part, right? It's sort of like filling the blank space.
Mm-hmm. Is there a reason not to tag on? I may just put the link to the one that I was thinking about. Yes, thank you very much, May. Is there a reason not to use that one to add to the larger picture? Because you can filter by state. So we could not only pull out Colorado whenever we wanted to, we could also compare nationally for different job titles and so on.
That's a great idea. Yeah, totally.
It's just, data-wise might be added value to on multiple
Looking
fronts.
beyond the state for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at CPR, there's also, that's another thing that we've been pushing with our CEO and in the newsroom, to be more transparent about pay. And there are many people at CPR who are interested. Like, a lot of us share our salaries very openly among each other to help other people when asking for raises and all that. So once we get that off the ground, we can totally like send that link or whatever it'll be around the newsroom. And I'm sure there'll be a good amount of people who would fill it out.
Awesome.
Kim, can I ask you a question? I'm having a vague memory. Wasn't there something that went through the legislature that's going to require more? Can you tell us about that? I just have the vague memory of it. I don't have the detail.
Yeah, that's correct. We went through a pay equity project last year at Rocky Mountain Public Media because there is some legislation around when you are posting jobs that you must post a salary band with them. The goal obviously is to remove as much bias as we can from the hiring process. So although the information that we have around salary bands, it was a market research survey that I did that it doesn't break down the pay equity of the person in the job. It only matches the skill set, the job description, the geographic location, the size of the media organization. I mean, it was a huge project, and I'm really glad that we did it because every single person in the organization can see the salary band and where their position and where they personally are on it. But it doesn't capture anything around diversity, gender orientation, BIPOC, nothing like that. So what you guys are talking about would be an evolution of what we've been able to do. So I'm really happy to participate in any way that we can, whether it's sharing the data that we use to create those bands, using the bands with the job descriptions that we had if it helps make a benchmark. But again, and just being transparent, there's a lot of information that you're talking about collecting that we did not collect when we created. It was the information was created for a different purpose.
Right. And so the legislation, did it pass, or is it still floating around out there?
I thought
so too, but I'm not positive. But the legislation would only require a salary range and a job posting, not to disclose actual salaries or anything. Okay, that's what I couldn't remember what the requirement was. Yeah. Okay. The requirement, but that it might be interesting to maybe get one of our data journalists to scrape those bands when jobs are posted so that we can compare. Then we know, okay, if people are sharing their salaries, their actual salaries, if employers have to post salary bands, we could compare where are you in the known salary band for that particular job title.
I actually think it would be super helpful for us to share that information. There would be one other line that we would need to add to it, which is the size or the revenue of the media organization. Mm-hmm. So like if you look at and I don't know how many people on this call are familiar with using the guides, but if you use GuideStar, Employers Council has one, Colorado Nonprofit Association, there's a bunch of different ones. the revenue size of the organization is one of the 7 factors that they use to create that information. And so like Rocky Mountain Public Media's is going to be very different than, you know, another organization or another. And so I think a lot of transparency around it will really help us get some information that we can put some power into the hands of people applying for jobs, and people that are in current jobs, which is what we want.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you.
So is there anyone else that you guys think we should make sure is at these working group meetings, or we should ask to present? Anything that we're missing that we need to reach out to?
Tony, do we have any union representation?
No, I think that's a good suggestion. Is it like IATSE? Who would be the unions represented in media?
The
The
Denver
Guild.
newspaper Guild?
Mhm.
The Guild is the biggest one.
Right.
One of our members, Danica, is with the Denver Post. Oh, and Tynan too. So I can ask them if they have connections if you need.
Okay, great. Great. Well, I'll make sure we reach out to them. And I don't think we're going to try and schedule the next meeting. We want to make sure that our new vistas are on board, but we'll be reaching out to everyone in mid-August to schedule our next working group meeting for late August. And we'll just keep in touch on the Slack channel and via email until then with any progress that's being made, and help people connect to work on these projects that everyone have kind of virtually raised their hands for. So any final thoughts? Yeah, thanks, Laura.
Yes, my final thought is your meeting is the first Zoom meeting of the day that has ended early, and that is a sign of good meeting leadership. Thank you.
I miss you.
You're here.
Yeah, I miss you too. I miss you too.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, yeah, thank you all. We'll post this recording and make sure you can search based on agenda items and stuff like that. Those are all posted at what's our website?
Yeah, CMA.
CMA.media/video. All these meetings are posted at. Thank you. All right.
Take care, everyone. Bye.